Would you believe that this entire set is lit using lights like these? Today on Cameras in the Craft, we'll show you how. Today, we're going to talk about how to use these little guys to light everything from sets to subjects. We're going to talk about how to use a single light up to 3 light setup to properly display what you're trying to convey. We're also going to do a little session with my wife, the model, and show you how we can actually use these lights to create some really cool portraiture. Now, everything that we used right here came in under $100. So if you're on the budget and you want to use lights like these to create some really epic imagery, let's go. For our first lighting setup, we're going to use a single light and 1 reflector. What you do is you take your light, you throw it behind you about 6 feet. You move it over to the side about 2 to 3 feet just so it's in that corner of the frame. You then lift it up to the very top of the frame and pretty much throw it right back over your shoulder. You then take your reflector, put it up right in front of you to catch that light and bounce it back at you. It does create an awesome flare going from top to bottom, which you can see in the camera right here, which might be something you're actually looking for. That being said, if you are 100% trying to do the simplest setup possible and you don't necessarily mind this bright highlight on the side of your head, this might be a simple trick for you. So now on to lighting setup number 2. This is just using 2 lights and 1 reflector. Now, our original light back here, which is our hair light, is doing the exact same thing. It's just coming down, going over the corner, and kind of giving us that little bit of haze. Our second light is right up in front of us, about 2 feet up, 2 feet to the right, and about 2 feet higher than what we are. That's shot right into a reflector to bounce this light back at you. Now, the most important thing about this is it gives you a little bit more clarity to the face because you're not having that hazing. The other thing it does is it adds a little bit more contrast. In here, you'll see a little bit more shadows under the nose, under the chin, in the eyes, but it gives you a little bit sharper of an image without as much haze. If you want to try a 2 light setup, this version of it is a very easy way to create more contrast in your images and on your video. It's also only adding $8 onto the total budget of your lighting setup. Using 2 lights is a very simple way to create contrasty images that can definitely up your video or photography game. Here's a photo using just these 2 lights and 1 reflector. Now, one important thing is whenever you're using a reflector and a single light is you can definitely play with the placement of that reflector to get really cool light to hit you. That might mean moving it slightly back, slightly forward, tilting it up, tilting it down. What I'm gonna do right now is I'm actually gonna have Jim take away this reflector and show you just how different of an image we have. So there you have it. This is an image without a reflector. You can see how crazy that just having this reflector to bounce the light back changes everything about the image. Now I'm gonna have Jim put the reflector back in here, and all of a sudden we are back in business. So our last setup is pretty simple. All we're adding is a backlight. Now that backlight just fills the background and we use a blue gel just to create a little bit more color and vibrance to the shot. Now, for me, it's a little bit bright when we shoot this way, and there's different ways of adjusting it. By adjusting this front light, I can actually darken down that background, which I'm going to do now. And there we go. So when I talked about using 2 lights and being able to move that reflector and your main light back and forth, that allows you to control how bright your main light is hitting you. By moving my reflector slightly forward and by angling my other light slightly down, I was actually able to darken down that background by brightening myself up and exposing for me. So it's a very simple way to create a little bit more contrast to your images. Now in this shot, because we're balancing out the lights a little bit better, we're not seeing the hazing and the crazy light streaks that we were before, but it's still slightly there. Now the coolest thing about all this is I can actually move this a step further and use dimmer switches, which cost about $10 each, just to affect how these lights all interact. But before I do that, first, here's a photo. So the amazing thing about this lighting is this is the exact same setup we had in the previous shot. The only difference is I added 2 dimmers to balance out the lighting and added this guy right here. Now, your environment that you're using is going to be way different probably than what I'm doing right now. Right now I have all the windows and the doors closed and I'm in a dark room, so the only ambient light is actually what I'm using with these lighting. If you have any questions about this lighting setup, feel free to drop us a comment below. The biggest thing to remember is it doesn't matter necessarily what camera you're shooting on. Being able to light your scene is one of the biggest game changers to creating quality content, whether it's portraits, webinars, videos, anything that you're trying to put out. The biggest key is just to keep experimenting until you have a nice quality of light and you're happy with your final image. So since everything I've done so far has mainly been displayed in video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my wife onto set and show you how we can use all of this stuff to create some really epic imagery. Here we go. So those are some of the images we were able to capture just using 3 lights, a reflector, a diffuser, and a couple gels. So just remember, this entire lighting setup was less than $100. You don't have to spend a fortune to create epic imagery. If you want to see any of the items that we had that we used for today's shoot, you can feel free to take a look at the link in the description below. If you liked what we covered today or have suggestions for something you'd like covered in the future, feel free to drop us a line in the comments below. We'll be sure to put it on our list of things to do. As always, click that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you and keep clicking.